What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025. I know I'm a little late to the party here, but I wanted to jump online and discuss my favorite albums and music from 2024. When I did my list of top 2023 albums, it ran about 35 minutes long, and I don't really blame anybody who couldn't get through the whole thing. This year, I wanted to be a little more direct. I am not going to be ranking these albums in a sequential list. I'm simply just going to tell you a lot of the albums that I loved this year. But to keep things exciting, I do have a top 5, and they are 5 albums from 5 different genres of music that I listen to. I found it really difficult and kind of impossible to compare a jazz album to a metal album. So instead, I wanted to make sure that I could still tell you what my favorite records of the year were without giving myself a big headache in the process. Those 5 genres are as follows: metal and hardcore. Yes, I'm combining them for the sake of this video. I know they are different. Pop, rap, jazz, and everything else. Rock, indie, whatever. Honorable mentions from 2024. They are as follows: Exhibition of Prowess by Kubla Khan. Negative Spaces by Poppy. More Insane by Undeath. Highly Irresponsible by Better Lovers. Moon Healer by Job for a Cowboy. Intrusive Thoughts and Usual Death by Shane Driscoll. Super underrated one there. Every Bridge Burning by Nails. Dark Times by Vince Staples. Scrapyard by Quedeca. Hyperdrama by Justice. Wall of Eyes by The Smile. Big Ideas by Remy Wolf. Opened This Wall by Berlioz. Wither by Nick Waters. Bias alert on this one, he's a friend of mine. Incredible album, super underrated. Check that one out. There's also a few EPs and live releases that I wanted to shout out here in the honorable mentions section. Big shout out goes to Counterparts, who released a crushing EP and a live album this year. We also have new EPs by Alluvial, Ollie Steele, Peary and Tommy, Silosis, Greyhaven, and another bias alert here, the new EP from Sweet Pill. I'm big friends with a couple members from this band. It's an incredible EP. Go check that one out. All right, with the honorable mentions out of the way, we're going to talk about my 30 favorite albums of the year. Remember, the first 25 of these are in no particular order. Man, was 2024 a great year for rap. We have to start with Kendrick Lamar. No, GNX was not my favorite rap album of the year. It was very close. And I think if you had to say who the best rapper of the year was, it was Kendrick, because it wasn't just GNX, it was the legendary beef between him and Drake and all the singles he put out, like Euphoria and Not Like Us, Meet the Grams. What GNX is a straightforward callback to the 90s West Coast hip-hop that Kendrick grew up on, and lyrically, he's not being as complex with double and triple entendres like he has been on previous releases. In fact, he even says on the opener song, Whacked Out Murals, quote, "Fuck a double entendre, I want you to feel this." He's being very direct about his place as the king of rap right now, and I do not dispute that claim. Another rap album that was fighting for my number one spot in this genre is Blue Lips by Schoolboy Q. I covered 2 songs off this album, that being Yearn 101 and Thank God for Me, both of which ended up on my top 5 songs of the year in Spotify Wrapped. It's just Schoolboy Q's best album. I truly believe it to be his best album in his career. You have both the kind of chill, smoker, lo-fi West Coast, and then you also have a lot of these like kind of rage rap, rock influenced, high tier bangers. You have some great features as well from the likes of Rico Nasty, Freddie Gibbs, Ab Soul. And in the lyrical side of things, yes, he's still being kind of a braggadocious gangster rapper in a lot of these songs, but at the same time, he's also talking about his sobriety, his mental health, overcoming a lot of loss in his life, particularly his relationship with Mac Miller, who passed sadly in 2018. Amazing record, Blue Lips, check it out. Now for some metal and hardcore records, we have See You Space Cowboys, Coup de Grace, a big album for me in the early half of the year. It's a combination of post-hardcore, mathcore, and emo with a real hardcore DIY spirit behind it. I had the pleasure of seeing them live earlier this year in Brooklyn, and I also purchased a snare drum from their drummer AJ, and I got to meet him. Super nice guy. The whole band, really, really down to earth. The lyrical content on this album, it's a little horny. A lot about relationships and lust, and a lot of catharsis about losing people that you loved and still learning to love yourself in the process. Fit for an Autopsy's The Nothing That Is. It is produced by the legend Will Putney, and I think this might be their best album to date. It is punishingly heavy, immaculately produced for the style that it is, which I think they call post-deathcore, which is to say, yes, there's some breakdowns and some blast beats, but there's a lot more emphasis on cohesive songwriting telling a really good story and not just assaulting you with heavy section after heavy section after heavy section. Especially the closer, the Silver Sun, really understands how to work melodically. Also, their lead singer, Joe, doing a lot of singing in between all of the screaming that he does. And his screaming performance is insanely good on this record. Lyrically, it's depressing times, and this is a very cathartic album to listen to if you are paying attention to what's going on. An unexpected great album of the year for me was Opeth's The Last Will and Testament. I think this is the best thing they've released since Watershed, which is like 15 years ago. It's got your classic Opeth proggy melodic riffs. They're bringing a little bit more screaming to the table, which they hadn't done for a couple albums in a row. A lot of memorable moments, flute solos, some great guitar solos, and lyrically it tells a cohesive narrative that I won't spoil for you, but there's a lot of Easter eggs to dig into. So Opeth, phenomenal work. Glad to see them still kicking it. Time for some pop albums. We have Porter Robinson's Smile. It is an album absolutely dripping in nostalgia. It's got a lot of synth pop and some indie rock with tons of lyrical musings on parasocial relationships, loneliness, and the internet age. Just some really catchy melodies all throughout. Also in pop, we have Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay. Oh my god, it is full of catchy synth pop bangers, really memorable hooks, and a super interesting narrative if you want to dive a bit deeper. It is a concept album. I won't spoil what about. But just a super great rhythm section, bass-heavy grooves, really memorable synth leads, and a great vocal performance as well. One of the more interesting rap albums of the year would be JPEG Mafia's I Lay My Life Down For You. I know we have a lot of Peggy fans here at the channel. Sin Miedo is coming soon, I promise. This is maybe my favorite Peggy album. It was pretty hard to top Scaring the Hose, rather than all of the kind of quirky, silly Danny Brown featured songs that he had on that project. This one is a lot darker, a lot more personal. And on the musical side, he's using more rock and metal samples than ever before. Tons of electric guitar, really loud, bassy, roomy drums. This is a treat, and really somebody at the top of their game from a production and a lyrical standpoint. We also have Denzel Curry's King of the Mischievous South. He really pulled a 180 from his last release that was a lot more jazzy, a lot slower, a lot more interpersonal and vulnerable, and said, you know, we're going back to the fucking trap bangers. This sounds like the music he came up listening to in South Florida. Tons of, 3-6 Mafia influence, tons of really great features on this thing, and it's just a lot of fun. Maybe the most fun rap album of the entire year, in my personal opinion. We have Coyote, You're My Star by Dana and Alden. This album was an instant mood boost for me when it came out and throughout the back half of the year. It's filled with laid-back, lo-fi jazz and funk, and even some reggae tunes, mostly instrumental, but occasionally with some really great guest vocals as well. I did have the pleasure of seeing them live at the Central Park Summer Stage in New York, and they put on a killer show. Another great jazz album of this year is Fearless Movement by Kamasi Washington, who continues to be maybe the greatest band leader working right now in jazz music. He's a prolific saxophone player who also brings a ton of fabulous collaborators to the table, some amazing drums and awesome rhythm section moments on this album, and occasional guest vocal spots by folks like George Clinton. He's also got Thundercat on one of these songs. Make sure to check out Road to Self if you're a drummer like me. There's an insane drum solo towards the back half of that song. Another really important rap album of the year is Alligator Bites Never Heal by Doechii. Maybe technically a mixtape, I'm counting it. She's had herself a really impressive year, especially her Tiny Desk performance. She did a spot on Stephen Colbert that was quite impressive, and a lot of really great live shows, Camp Flog Gnaw. What can I say? Her lyricism is top-notch, her flows and charisma. The production is so diverse, and she really stands as one of the best rappers in the game right now. We have I Wanna Disappear by The Story So Far, bringing us some classic 2010s pop-punk vibes with up-to-date lyrical reflection on what it means to age and change as a human being, both in friends, relationships, and your own interpersonal self. We have Oath by Mono. I wrote this down as the type of music to die to. It elicits feelings of gratitude, acceptance, and finding peace through the pain. It is largely an instrumental, ambient rock noise album. Really, really good to listen to if you just need to sit and reflect. Childish Gambino's Brando Stone and the New World. Much like most Childish Gambino projects, it is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of what styles he's bringing to the table, but I don't think it's a mixed bag in terms of quality. He's got pop songs, he's got funk. Yes, maybe it's not the most cohesive album in the world, but I think if you listen to it from front to back, you'll find a lot of songs that stick out and kind of work their way back to you in your memory. Why Laud by No Worries, which is the combination of Anderson .Paak and Knowledge. It's just a chill as hell lo-fi rap album. This album is just a chill guy who really doesn't give a fuck. Just enjoying yourself, company of others, friends, relationships. Great production on this thing. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Every song is pretty straight to the point. Not a lot of beat switches, but you really understand how much emphasis they put on the sequencing of these tracks, because the way it goes from front to back almost feels like one entire movement. Just a super chill ass album. That's really all I could say about it. We have Two Star and the Dream Police by McGee. He's very early on in his career, but what he brings to the table here is a lot of ambient, reverb-soaked guitar and kind of R&B music with a really unique and stellar voice that he brings to the table as well. Another amazing hardcore album from this year is Only One Mode by Speed. I found them, like a lot of other people, from the song The First Test, which was, I believe, the main single off of this record. It had a bit of a viral moment because there's a flute solo in it. You don't typically hear flute in hardcore, but they made it work really well. And then they got booked on a tour with Knocked Loose, which I got to see them. Classic hardcore style with super uplifting, self-affirming lyrics. They really have one of the best vibes of any band in hardcore right now. And it's a pretty short listen, so check out Speed, Only One Mode. One of the craziest albums I listened to this year, It's Inside You by Candy. They call their style hypercore. It is certainly a hardcore album, but they introduce a lot of electronic production styles, a lot of like break beats and jungle mixed in with these harsh synth noises and crushing distorted riffs. If you like heavy shit, if you like abrasive shit, check out Candy. Probably the pop album that was closest to being my number one without being my number one is Charm by Clairo. Oh my God, her progression as an artist has been really a joy to watch. I got to see her live in 2023 when she was performing songs off of her first two albums, but this third one I think is her best yet by far. It brings a lot more live instrumentation to the table. It's a very quiet and seductive kind of singer-songwriter indie pop album. Juna was definitely like my pop song of the year, I think, or top 2 pop songs of the year. Definitely going to be spinning it a lot in 2025. Big shout out to Clairo. Willow's Empathogen. Willow Smith, daughter of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, she's been putting out a lot of music for the last 10 years, ever since she was a little kid. I was a big fan of the album she put out in, I believe, 2022, which was more on the rock and grunge side. This album is fully soaked in jazz and R&B, some of the best songwriting of the year, amazing vocal performances, and an insane, funky, groove-laden rhythm section on all of this. She also had a great Tiny Desk performance for a lot of these songs as well. Belmont released their new album, Liminal, earlier in the year, and it is classic Belmont. It's a mix of pop punk and progressive metal. It's got bouncy riffs, very fun melodic guitar hooks, super cool breakdowns, and a couple of funny sampling moments that I won't spoil for you. Check out Belmont if you're a fan of bands like Periphery, The Story So Far, really any kind of like proggy pop punk type of band, you'd want to check them out. We also have Boundaries and their new record, Death is Little More. This is a boundary-pushing metalcore album soaked in distortion, very cathartic, depressing lyrics, but lots of bouncy, syncopated riffs as well. A bit of a prog influence there, but not fully like a prog metal album. I would say anyone who likes hardcore or prog metal should check this out. That's Boundaries. On the heavier side of things, we have Aborted's Vault of Horrors. Aborted has been one of my favorite death metal bands for as long as I've been listening to death metal, and they have been consistently dropping dizzying, speed-crushing, distorted riffs, solos, and some of the scariest guttural screams you've ever heard in your life. This album is no different. It's just par for the course, Aborted, death metal, grindcore blend. And on this album, they brought a lot of really cool features to the table. Members of Despised Icon, Flesh God Apocalypse, Shadow of Intent, and more. So if you like any of those bands, or really any death metal or deathcore whatsoever, check out Aborted. Another really cool death metal album of this year is Blood Incantation's Absolute Elsewhere. This is a death metal prog kind of experimental metal album. A lot of ambient sections, a lot of blast beats, tremolo picking, and a really interesting story that's broken up into two main acts. The whole album flows very cohesively. You have some really cool experimental instrumentation in very long songs that have these great kind of crescendos and builds and ebbs and flows. It's not a straightforward punch to the face kind of metal album. It's one you really want to sit with and let wash over you in a full listen. But I recommend it very highly. Check out Blood Incantation. We've now made it to my top 5 of the year. Again, I didn't want to order everything because it's just too much of a headache, and it's really hard to compare Kamasi Washington to Aborted. They're just so different in what they provide. Woo! Man, I've been straight greeping it in the last couple months of 2024. This album is so weird. It is so unique to itself. It's experimental prog rock with a lot of Latin and jazz instrumentation as well. Lyrically, it is very strange. Do not take what he says at face value. He is playing characters in every song, very narcissistic, self-inflated, horny individuals, both in current time and all the way back in the 1800s. In one song, he plays as a war general. In one, he plays as a cuck. But musically, it's just so infectious. If you like bossa nova, if you like experimental art rock, definitely not for everybody. Jordy Greep, Greepin' It, the new sound, top 5 of the year. My favorite rap album of the year, very hotly contested. This was the toughest genre for me to pick a favorite. It's got to be Tyler, the Creator's Chromacopia. He's been such a powerhouse for the last 15 years, and specifically his last 4-album run is one of the greatest in rap history. But he doesn't just rap. He likes to call himself a creator because he creates music and he creates art. The visual aesthetics tied to the release and performances of this album have been really, really cool. But to talk about the music specifically, it's got distorted, heavy synth Tyler, the Creator bangers on songs like Ratata. Sticky is another banger that I covered, which also has a lot of marching drums in it. You have Thought I Was Dead. A lot of like heavy hitting songs, more reminiscent of his old albums, but then you also have his new sound, the neo-funk, the R&B, the soul, and a lot of really vulnerable personal lyrics about relationships, about self-love, about the Black experience. I mean, there's so many highlights off this album. Take Your Mask Off, Darling I featuring Tizo Touchdown. Amazing features on this album too. You got Tizo Touchdown, you have Sexy Red, you have Lil Wayne, Doechii on Balloons. I mean, it's just a joy to listen to. Biggest out the city after Kenny. That's a fact now, and I believe him when he says that. My favorite jazz album of the year was Bad Bad Not Good's Mid Spiral. It's just a joy to listen to. It's jazz and it's Latin, and it flows beautifully. It's a very long album that I never get tired of listening to. I think you could play it from front to back or just pick out any song, and it's just an instant smile on my face. It's mostly instrumental. I call it just like a flow state type of record where as soon as I put it on, I'm just really experiencing the present moment. Very comfortable, very joyous, very freeing sound. It reminds me of being at the beach with my closest friends. I mean, that's one of the instances where I listen to this album a lot. So very, very, very special, very happy album. That's Bad Bad Not Good's Mid Spiral, definitely my jazz album of the year. My pop album of the year, and this should come as no surprise to any subscribers, it would be Brat by Charlie XCX. I covered 3 songs off of Brat and or the Brat remix album, that being 360, Sympathy is a Knife, and Apple, the remix featuring the Japanese House. It really was the most significant cultural event in music this year, only behind or tied with the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef. Musically, Charlie XCX is perfecting her style. It is not a pop album that sounds like what pop has been giving us for the last 5 years. I really believe that she is pushing boundaries with the help of producers A.G. Cook and lots of other people featured across this album. Lyrically, there are some very raw, emotional, tender songs, but also your just club bangers like 360, Club Classics, Von Dutch. And it's just a force. Like, even if you've heard things that try to sound like this, none of them really capture that ethos the way that Charlie has been doing ever since like 2018. And she's just been perfecting that sound. And this is the peak of what she's been working on for many, many years. And finally, my metal/hardcore album of the year, and frankly, my album of the year, is Knocked Loose. You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to. I covered Blinding Faith and Suffocate featuring Poppy and Don't Reach For Me. I've been listening to it nonstop since it came out. I've seen Knocked Loose perform many songs off this album twice over the course of this year. Once on their headlining tour and once on their support tour for Slipknot. Seeing Knocked Loose play Madison Square Garden, pretty unforgettable experience. This album is uncompromising in the band's brutality and their DIY hardcore ethos. And in that uncompromising effort, they have reached new commercial heights that I've never seen hardcore hit in my life. Even metalcore, the much more commercially viable genre, which you could also call this album metalcore, has not seen these heights. What you have here is a perfect 30-some minutes of insanely heavy, abrasive, anxiety-inducing metal and hardcore music that is as cathartic as it is loud. It is as vulnerable as it is accusatory. Lyrically, the album focuses on the role that organized religion plays in our entire lives. Even if you don't subscribe to those religions, they influence people's values, our government policies. They understand the role that this can play in someone's own feelings of worth, how they see themselves in relation to others, and how they view entire groups of people. And this album is a warning not to let the powers that be completely dictate how you see the world. Musically, it just kind of has me at a loss for words. This album made me feel more emotions than any other album this year and any album of the last couple of years. This is a really, really important record. I hope it wins the Grammy. I think most people watching this have heard it or heard of it by now, but if you haven't given it a try, please put on Knocked Loose's You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to, because that is my album of 2024. I'm going to link to all of the songs that I covered off these records in the description below. There are songs off of these albums that I will be covering in 2025. I have a couple in mind already, but if you can think of one that you would love to hear, please drop it below. I would also love to hear what your favorite albums of 2024 were. So drop them in the comments. I will be reading them and responding to every single one. 2024, that's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.